Imagine walking into a room full of confident, high-powered executives. You stand there, quietly holding a piece of paper, the culmination of years of work, a proposal that you believe could change everything. And as you speak, the room falls silent. For a moment, you think they're listening. But then it happens. A chuckle. A few eyes glance at each other, barely concealing their amusement. And then, the words come, "That's cute, but it'll never work." This is how John Matthews felt the day he presented his idea at the company. He had worked tirelessly for months on a proposal, one that could change the entire industry. A simple, yet powerful idea that would allow them to disrupt a market that had been stagnant for decades. But the reaction he got? It wasn't what he expected. John had always been a quiet force in the office. He wasn't the loudest in the room, nor was he the one to jump in and grab attention. He was the type to observe, think deeply, and act when the time was right. But deep down, he had an entrepreneurial fire that burned stronger than anyone realized. And that fire had led him to this moment, this proposal. The idea itself wasn't groundbreaking in the sense that it was completely new, but it was innovative. It was the kind of idea that could streamline operations, improve efficiency, and ultimately, save millions of dollars for the company. But to the people who held the reins of power in that room, it was just another wild idea from a quiet guy in the corner. The seasoned executives who had climbed the corporate ladder with sharp elbows and louder voices didn't see it. They saw John's proposal as naive, a pipe dream that would never work in the real world. For a moment, John stood there, feeling small. The snickers and sideways glances were hard to ignore. His idea wasn't just dismissed, it was ridiculed. And in that moment, something inside him clicked. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about proving them wrong. They had laughed. They had belittled his vision. But what they didn't realize was that John had never cared for their approval. He wasn't trying to please them. He was trying to solve a problem that they couldn't even see. And now, he had made a decision. He wasn't going to waste another second trying to get their buy-in. Imagine standing in front of a room full of people who have the power to make or break your career, and seeing the look on their faces as they dismiss your hard work. It's gut-wrenching, isn't it? But John didn't let the sting of their laughter linger. Instead, he walked out of that room with a new sense of purpose. His idea was too good to let go, and if they weren't going to take it seriously, he would find someone who would. The next few days were a blur. John spent his evenings after work researching. He dove into every detail of his proposal, refining the concept, making it stronger. He wasn't going to let the company's rejection be the end of his journey. No, if they wouldn't embrace his vision, he would build his own path. One way or another, he would show them that he was right. But here's the catch. John didn't have the money to go it alone. He didn't have the resources, the infrastructure, or the team. All he had was the idea. That was all he needed. As he sat at his kitchen table one night, staring at the glowing screen of his laptop, John made a choice. He would leave the company. He would take his proposal, tweak it, and pitch it to investors who didn't know him, didn't know his past, and didn't know his failures. All they would know was that John had an idea, a brilliant one. And so, as John packed up his things and handed in his resignation, he didn't feel fear. He felt something else, freedom. He was no longer tied to a place that had rejected his talent. He was now free to create something entirely his own. He walked out of the office for the last time, a sense of resolve washing over him. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be obstacles. There would be challenges. But what they had mocked in him, his quiet determination, his willingness to take risks, was exactly what would make him succeed. That night, John reached out to his first investor. It wasn't much, just a small amount to get started. But it was enough to bring his idea to life. Slowly, the pieces began to fall into place. The product was refined, the team was built, and the vision began to materialize. And with each passing day, John's business grew. But what he didn't know was how quickly things would take off. How quickly the company that had laughed at his proposal would begin to see their mistake. John's decision to leave the company wasn't just an escape. It was the beginning of something much bigger. He spent the next few weeks in a whirlwind of activity, contacting investors, refining his business plan, and building the foundations of a new venture. Every day, he woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. He was no longer confined by office politics or the ridicule of his former colleagues. This was his chance to prove to the world, and more importantly, to himself, that his idea was worth something. But even as he took those first steps, doubts crept in. Was this really possible? Could he build something on his own with nothing but his idea and a small group of backers? The weight of the risk was enormous, but the idea had always felt bigger than him. It had the potential to revolutionize an entire industry, and John wasn't going to let fear hold him back. Weeks turned into months. The small group of investors who had believed in him started to grow. More and more, people saw the value in what John was trying to create. But despite the growing momentum, there were still those who doubted him. They had seen him as just another employee at his old company, quiet, unassuming, easily overlooked. Now, he was trying to build something from the ground up, and they couldn't understand how he could go from being a nobody to becoming a legitimate player in the business world. John's former colleagues, those who had laughed at his proposal, didn't even know what was happening. They were still going about their business, still thinking that his idea was just a fleeting moment, a one-time fluke. But in the back of their minds, they knew something wasn't right. They started to hear whispers, rumors about John's new venture, about how quickly it was growing. They dismissed it at first. It was just another competitor, they told themselves. Nothing to worry about. But the truth was different. Every day, John's company grew stronger. The product was more refined than it had ever been, and soon, it started attracting real attention. A few key players in the industry began to take notice. What John had started as a simple, rejected idea was now beginning to make waves. His company was proving its worth in ways that no one had expected. Then came the breakthrough moment. John's company secured a major partnership with a global distributor. This deal was a game-changer. It gave them access to a massive customer base and the infrastructure they needed to scale quickly. The success of the deal was immediate. The product was now in the hands of millions of people, and the sales figures were staggering. But just as John was beginning to savor the victory, the old company, his former employers, took notice. They couldn't ignore the threat any longer. They had laughed at him. They had dismissed his ideas. Now, here he was, with a business that was becoming a true rival, and they were left scrambling to keep up. The executives who had once mocked John's proposal were now facing a harsh reality. Their market share was shrinking. Customers were starting to move away from their product, attracted by the innovation and efficiency of John's company. There was no escaping the fact that John had not only built a better product, but had also tapped into a need that the larger company had failed to recognize. The tables had turned. John, however, wasn't looking back. He didn't care about their failure or their attempts to discredit him. He was too focused on the future. The success he was building was far beyond what he had ever imagined. And with each new partnership, each new milestone, the gap between his company and the one that had rejected him grew wider. His competitors were scrambling to catch up. They tried to copy his model, mimic his success, but it was too late. John had already established his company as a leader in the field. The innovation he had put into his product was something no one else could replicate, and the trust he had built with his customers was unshakable. But there was one final moment that would change everything. John's company went public, and the shares soared. It was the moment that proved to everyone, especially the executives who had laughed at him, that John's vision wasn't just a fluke. It was the future. As the shares hit record highs, John couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. He had gone from being laughed at in a corporate meeting to building a billion-dollar business from the ground up. The company that had rejected his proposal, that had belittled his ideas, was now trying to keep pace with him. In that moment, John realized that the ridicule he had faced, the laughter that had stung so deeply, had been a blessing in disguise. It had driven him to prove them wrong, to show the world that he had something worth listening to. The pain of their rejection had fueled his success, and now he was standing on top, looking down at the very company that had once dismissed him. It was sweet revenge. But for John, it wasn't about getting back at anyone. It was about proving to himself that he had always been capable of more than they ever gave him credit for. The wealth, the success, the recognition, they were just the byproducts of his determination to never give up, no matter how many people laughed at him. And as he stood there, watching his company soar to new heights, John knew one thing for sure: the best was yet to come. John's success story was spreading like wildfire. His company was no longer a small startup. It had become a symbol of what could be achieved when someone dared to defy the odds, refused to be overlooked, and followed through on their vision, no matter the obstacles. Yet, even with all the accolades, the wealth, and the attention, there was still something gnawing at him, a lingering, unresolved tension. It wasn't about the money anymore. It wasn't about being the richest man in the room or having the most innovative product. It was about the people who had once laughed at him, who had dismissed his ideas as nothing more than pipe dreams. The executives who had held his future in their hands, only to toss it aside. They were still out there. And though John had moved on, they hadn't. The old company, his former employer, was struggling to stay relevant. They had tried to play catch-up, but it was too late. The market had already shifted, and the customers had spoken with their wallets. They were flocking to John's business, the one that had been born from their mockery. And while that was sweet, there was still a lingering bitterness for John. He had built something great, but the pain of being dismissed so easily, so cruelly, lingered in the back of his mind. Then, one day, John received an unexpected phone call. It was from a source inside the old company. The voice on the other end was familiar, one of the executives who had once sat in that meeting, laughing at his proposal. "John, we need to talk," the voice said, almost desperate. "This is about the future of the company. We need your help." At first, John thought it was a prank. The same people who had belittled him were now asking for his assistance. The irony was almost too much to bear. But as the voice continued, something in John's gut told him this was real. His former colleagues were watching their empire crumble, and they were now desperate to stop it. "Why would I help you?" John replied, his voice calm but filled with an undercurrent of resolve. "You didn't take me seriously when I tried to help you. You laughed at my ideas. Why would I lift a finger to save your sinking ship?" The executive on the other end was silent for a moment, the desperation in their voice unmistakable. We made a mistake, John. We know that now. We're not asking you to come back. We're asking for your expertise. You built something that we couldn't see. We want to partner with you. Please, help us get back on track." John leaned back in his chair, a small smile tugging at his lips. The tables had turned. They had laughed at his idea, dismissed him as just another cog in the machine. And now, here they were, begging for his expertise, hoping that he would save them from their own failure. But deep down, John knew the answer. He had already won. He didn't need their validation anymore. His company was thriving, and he had proven everything he needed to prove. The only thing left was to let them live with the consequences of their choices. "Let me tell you something," John said, his voice steady, carrying the weight of everything he had gone through. "I built my business not just to compete with you, but to show the world that I am more than what you thought I was. I don't need your help, and I don't need your approval. You had your chance, and you laughed at me. Now, you'll have to live with that. But you'll also have to live with the fact that I'm the one leading the industry now. Not you. Not anymore." The executive's voice faltered. "So you're saying no?" "I'm saying that this is your lesson," John replied. "You can't keep laughing at the people you don't understand. You can't keep dismissing the ones who have real ideas, real talent. You should have listened to me. And now, it's too late." With that, John hung up the phone, the finality of his decision settling over him. He had made it. He had built something bigger than any of them ever thought possible. His business wasn't just a success, it was a statement, a testament to everything that had driven him to this point. But even with the satisfaction of knowing he had proven them all wrong, John still had one more thing to do. He had to make sure that the world knew that his success wasn't just a fluke. It wasn't just about making money. It was about changing the game, about revolutionizing the industry. So, John took his company public once more, and this time, it wasn't just about the product. It was about the message. His company was now a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever been dismissed, laughed at, or overlooked. It was a shining example of what could happen when someone dared to dream, even when no one else believed in them. The IPO was a massive success. Shares soared. Investors flooded in. And as John looked at the figures on the screen, the weight of everything he had achieved hit him. His company wasn't just worth billions. It was a movement, a force that could never be stopped. As he stood there, watching the stock prices climb, John realized something important. He wasn't doing this for revenge anymore. He was doing this for the next generation of dreamers. The ones who would come after him. The ones who would face the same doubts, the same ridicule, the same obstacles. John's success wasn't just for him. It was for everyone who had ever been told they couldn't succeed. It was for the people who would follow in his footsteps and show the world that they, too, had something to offer. The old company? It was a distant memory now, a cautionary tale of what happened when you ignored talent. As John looked at the empire he had built, he smiled. He hadn't just won the battle. He had changed the game forever.